Welcome to the Communicating Capital podcast, where finance and communication get a fresh perspective. Hosted by a dynamic team of women in the industry, we're here to redefine the conversation with candid, no-nonsense interviews featuring top executives, communication experts, and industry leaders. With a focus on clarity and real-world impact, we make the complex world of finance, law, business digestible and relatable. So whether you're a seasoned professional or you're just interested in our world, we're here to help you navigate the space in new and exciting ways. Today, we have an incredibly exciting guest, someone that I've had the privilege of knowing since our time overlapping at Pepperdine University, where we're doing our MBA programs. Jeremy Evans is an award-winning attorney, CEO, and industry leader specializing in entertainment, media, and sports law, where he represents everyone from Fortune 500s to production companies, talent agencies, and teams. He's also the host of California Sports Lawyer podcast, a former president of the California Lawyers Association, and an advisor to entrepreneurs in entertainment, media, and sports for the U.S. Small Business Administration. So Jeremy, welcome to Communicating Capital.
No, well, thanks for having me. When you were reading that bio, I was like, wait a second, who else is on this show?
Oh, it's absolutely impressive. I feel like your career, when I was researching it, has been the most impressive one so far. There's so many different layers, and we're going to unpack that as we go through our questions here. But from the intersection of law, business, and entertainment, from advising Fortune 500s to working with rising talent, there's so many aspects to deal making. Can you take us back to the moment when you decided to launch California Sports Lawyer, and what was the vision? How was it founded, and how has it evolved?
Well, Jesse, first of all, thanks for having me on. I've always admired, your work and your personality, and even as we're doing this through a screen, like you can, you definitely bring an energy to the table that I've always appreciated when we were students, and now as we're building, businesses and furthering our careers. So I think for me, I sort of go back to when I was a young kid, about, 5, 6 years old. My mom had asked me, and the story will be brief, but she had asked me, she said, what do you want to be when you want to grow up? And my response was, I want to be president of the United States and a lawyer.
Love it.
And that's a pretty fantastic thing for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old to say. I don't know where I got that from. But it's sort of been this very humbling experience where at that time, when my mom asked me, why did you say that? Why was that your answer? I responded by saying, well, I want to help people and like to argue. And as it turns out, I don't like to argue. I don't like to help people. And what all of my law school experience showed me was that I was much more of a statesman and a deal maker, and somebody that wanted to bring people together as opposed to breaking them apart. And I remembered this sort of great quote. This isn't why I did this, but I think I heard this quote years later, and it put a sort of an idea towards why I made the decisions that I did. But I couldn't sort of figure it out at the time why I was doing it. I was just sort of going without what I thought was the best way to go. And there's this great quote by Judge Judy where she had talked about, not that I didn't watch the show really, but she was on a television series or being interviewed, and she made a comment that, and I'm paraphrasing, that to be successful, it's not just that you're passionate about something, but it's about finding something that you're passionate about that people are willing to pay you to do. And that is what a small business is. And I think a lot of people miss that second step. So when I went through law school, I had all these great experiences in the things that I thought I would like, thought I would not like. And what I came out with was, I don't want to be a litigator. I don't like being in court. I only liked the theatrics of it, the performance part, and was really just wanted to bring people together and to make deals. And I thought, okay, if I can marry that passion and skill set with something that I like in terms of a practice area, I think we have a winning scenario. And so for me, that was sports and entertainment. I grew up playing sports, grew up doing plays as a kid, and loving film and entertainment, being in and around Hollywood. So to me, that just made sense to launch the practice. I will say, in sort of a last comment on this, that that particular experience, I was very naive, right, to open my own business, and especially in the legal field. and not know what was going to happen or how things were going to change. But I'm glad I was naive, because had I known all the struggles and things you would go through, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Right. It translates. That definitely translates. It is relatable. And talking about being an entrepreneur, Jeremy, in the industry really is a challenge, but obviously the legal profession has traditionally been built around like long standing structures, large firms. What was it like to break out on your own and build your own law firm tailored specifically for entertainment, media, and sports? That's a niche.
Well, I appreciate you asking the question. And I think for me, I did a lot of research and a lot of soul searching prior to doing it. And I think what I sort of came out with was, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to run my own business. I might as well love what I'm doing and might as well love the practice that I'm in. Why would I struggle through a practice area that I don't want to do? And I also realized what law school gave me and what education gave me, and sort of the idea of being passionate and being disciplined and taking responsibility, was that I could make my own choices with regard to where I wanted to work and how I wanted to work. And to me, I had so many experiences, sort of working for big companies that, or even for smaller employers, that I just didn't feel like it was a good fit. Mm-hmm. And I was like, the legal industry is tough as it is. And I thought, but I love the lawyers and I love the industry. Where can I sort of find a good place where I can both help and also be successful? And so with all that in mind, I thought, okay, let me launch this thing. But I met with a lot of lawyers. I met with one of the books that I read. I literally Googled, how do you start your own law practice? And that gave me an insight into other books and more formal research. And one of the great pieces of advice I got was, make a list of 5 lawyers you look up to and have a conversation with them, and then ask them for 5 more names. And so within about a 2 to 3 month period, I met and spoke with about 60 different lawyers. And none of them were in the entertainment and sports practice area. But that insight gave me so much knowledge and saved me a lot of headache and heartache in terms of gathering knowledge and figuring out how to run a business. Mm-hmm. That it helped. I will say too, diversifying what you do, not in the sense of my practice area. I've stuck to entertainment and sports, and specifically contracts and IP, my entire practice. However, there is some AI involved in that now, but that's just more about keeping up with the times and mm-hmm. understanding the rules and regulations and all that, and having a passion for technology and what the future might hold. But I think for me, it was sort of this great opportunity to build something, to start something new, to have my brand, to trademark California Sports Lawyer, and to realize that it had not been trademarked in the history of mankind was surprising. But it's worked out great. But I've diversified in the sense that I do other things that complement my practice. So I teach as an adjunct in the graduate sport management program at Cal State Long Beach.
Love it.
And again, it's not something that takes a lot of time. You do it a couple times a year. It's great for the students, great for the community, but it also helps too, because you're getting paid for that. I also work in-house counsel and have worked in-house counsel for major corporations. Currently working in-house with a company called iHerb, which does online marketplace for vitamins and other products. A great company. And I do all their global IP work for them. So those are just different things that I think have helped launch the business and keep me sane, because I think, frankly, I like having different things going on so I can have, so it can expand my brain, I guess.
I love it. And I just get so captivated by what you're saying, because there's just a lot that goes into Jeremy. And so I know from being in our MBA programs that you're just wicked smart. You were, just so everybody that is listening in could know, that he was always top of class, First to get the assignment done, and then first to be the one to help everybody else, which I appreciated as I was taking classes with him for sure. But on top of that, you're obviously a master negotiator when it comes to entertainment, media, sports, contracts. You're talking about IP rights. We just briefly mentioned perhaps like larger companies, high stakes deals. What are some of the key factors that go into making a great deal for your clients?
Yeah, no, thanks. And I appreciate that, all those kind words.
It's true. They're true.
I feel like when we were in business school together, it was a very hard degree to get.
It was on top of working and doing everything else and showing up for family and just, it was a lot just to unpack that. That was a lot. Yeah.
And the math that you have to do, all the different things that so, to be honest with you, my strategy was I'm going to be as helpful and try to be as insightful as possible. So that, and of course, it's a teamwork environment. So I'm like, I'm going to provide the skills that I can provide so I can rely on other people to provide the skills that they can provide. And I love that about business school because it's so realistic in that way. I think law school sometimes has a tendency to be very theoretical, but in the practice of law, it's very collegial, and you work together and you're using templates and all these different things that I think you don't get to see. And now that I've lost my train of thought.
Sorry. I was talking about deal making. If you're going to how are you, making the best deals you can for your clients and making sure that they're coming out on top?
Yes. Okay. Amazing question. And probably the most important question when it comes to the clients, because I think I always try to keep top of mind, what is the client's objective? Mm-hmm. When I interview a client, which is so important, and I'll ask them a lot of questions. A lot of times I'm looking for personality too, because I want to work with people that I will get along with and that will get along with me, and that it can be beneficial together, mm-hmm. right? You want to enjoy your clients, and they want to be able to enjoy you and to be able to have a good and successful practice. In other practice areas, maybe that's not possible, but for mine it is. And it's one of the reasons why I chose it, because relationships mean a lot to me. And so when I broker a deal, one of the first questions I ask is, even in the interview, is I'll say, what is your objective here? What do you want to accomplish? What is your best result here? And I get that up front and I understand it. And then I'll have a sort of face-to-face moment with them where it's like, hey, here's the situation and here's where I think what we can get. And you have that discussion with the client, you're up front and you don't overexpose yourself by saying, oh, well, I can guarantee this deal or guarantee that deal. It's like, hey, can't guarantee anything. So I think for me, it's really about asking the question, what's your objective? It's about having that honest discussion as to what can conceivably be done with understanding that you can't control the other side and how they're going to respond. And that 3, it's about being upfront with the other side about what you want. Often a strategy of mine would be to provide the deal up front and to say, this is what we want. And to do it with reasonable, inferences, and to have a background of facts or a background of circumstances that back up your points. So that way, when you go into it, you're not just throwing out numbers to throw out numbers, but you're doing it because you have evidence to show that this person is worth that much or this deal is worth that much, mm-hmm. based on some prior deal or whatever it is, market or whatever the situation is. But that's what I try to do. I try to ask the right questions. I understand what my client wants. I'm honest with my client about potential results. And then I really try to be honest with the other side as to what we want and what we're trying to accomplish and why we want it. Very rarely would I ask for something without giving a reason why we're asking for it.
Love that. It's good. I feel like that's a good trait to have, especially in your profession. I mean, I know I would appreciate that when talking to any potential client or any potential business partner or anybody that might be working with us in the future. I'm going to quickly pivot because Hollywood to major sports leagues, the entertainment and sports industries, I feel like they're evolving rapidly, especially with the rise of streaming, NIL deals, digital media rights. What trends are you watching closely now, and how are they reshaping what you're doing?
I think AI is an important piece. I think it's having more and more of an effect on how business is done, and it's in every area. If you're talking about entertainment, There's even union deals now in play with the Writers Guild and Producers Guild and other guilds as to how much AI can be used and where it can be used. I think we're going to continue to see regulations there. There were some recent articles in the Hollywood Reporter this week talking about the expansion of the use of AI by certain production houses to come up with scripts and different ideas for movies and films and any sort of television series. I think in sports, we're seeing it more and more with technology and analytics. Even in minor league baseball and even in Major League Baseball with spring training now, they're using automated systems to call balls and strikes as a test. And we're likely to see that in Major League Baseball in 2026. So there is clearly a move with regard to technology, and it's going to continue to change. We're going to continue to see the internationalization of things where baseball and other sports will continue to be played overseas, continue to have athletes coming from overseas, where it's just as the world grows, as social media continues to provide opportunities and information for people. I think it's becoming more standardized to have information. The question then becomes, and the differentiator becomes, how do you use that information effectively? Because everybody has information now. The question is how do you use it, and when do you get information overload? I will often now conscientiously not get on social media and not spend time looking through Instagram reels, even though I find a lot of the stuff on there very funny. Enjoy sharing the reels. Right. I mean, it's fantastic, but it's also like, I'd rather read a book. You have to be disciplined about that stuff. So I think people on a personal and business level need to be aware of AI. They need to be aware of what's going on with technology, utilize it as a tool, but do not utilize it as a crutch. I think we're seeing a lot of these sports broadcasting deals come together where you're seeing more and more companies work together to distribute content. And I think the reason for that is because people's attention spans are so divided between multiple screens and multiple applications and opportunities to see and view content. We've become a highlight society where people would rather watch highlights of something than watch the entire show. I often find that if I see a reel on Instagram from a television show, I haven't even seen the television show or the movie, but I think it's a hilarious scene. And then as it turns out, then I'll watch the movie later and I'm like, that was a funny scene, but maybe the movie wasn't that great.
True.
So I think we're seeing a lot of those changes. We live in, I think, some very interesting and great times. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there for people to grow businesses and to change and to make change in the world.
And Jeremy, I was reading that a huge part of your work involves IP, branding, ensuring that creators, athletes, and businesses protect their rights from a PR perspective. And being that we're in PR and in communications, we know that this is becoming increasingly more and more important, especially as more players come onto the market. There's also, speaking of AI, there's different deep fakes and things like that. It's quite scary out there. What do you think are the most common legal mistakes people make when it comes to IP, and how would you suggest we avoid them? Big question. I know we're going to have to tidy it up, but what do you think?
It's okay. No, and I think it's such an important question because oftentimes as a lawyer, I wouldn't say oftentimes, but you do run across situations where people will make decisions and then regret those decisions and then come to you for help, which as a lawyer, you have to love doing. I mean, I like doing it. I like helping people. And frankly, from a business perspective, it's also what helps keep your lights on because you do need to help solve people's problems. But
Sure.
It was funny. My mom the other day was saying something like, Jeremy, don't worry too much about that. And that is true. It was a certain situation I was worried about with a client. But the reality of it is sometimes you're paid to worry. The client calls you to take on their problems. And I don't think that's something that people realize a lot, is that the stress that goes into being a lawyer. And that's why you have to love what you do. Otherwise, you'll be burnt out. So from an IP perspective, often the problem is, oh, well, I didn't research that name, or I've been using this name for so long but didn't trademark it, or I have this name and I added an S to it and that changes it, or I only stole or borrowed 20% of this copyright. The problem is IP is 4 areas, right? It's patent, trademark, trade secrets, and copyright. I don't do patents. You need a special license for that. They look for engineers and math majors to basically take the test and get the license to be a patent lawyer. Patents are fascinating, but not my practice area. Trade secrets is like the Coca-Cola formula. There's no filing process. You kind of just go through. The real test is basically in California is, did you keep it secret and does it have economic value? And so Coca-Cola formula would obviously fall into that, right? And then with copyright trademark, which is really where my practice is, branding is everything. And it's what people remember, it's what they see. And it really is the first introduction, it's the front door to your business. Mm-hmm. And so the importance of protecting that, I don't think people realize enough. And oftentimes they've gotten too far into a business and they have to pivot and change, and that's not great. And so I think people often make the mistake of not realizing how important IP is up front in going through the registration process, hiring a lawyer or whatever services you utilize to figure out your trademarks and your copyrights. But I think just people need to take IP more seriously in terms of what you can create from an IP portfolio. So, even in my practice, and then I'll stop, is, I've created this portfolio now where I've got, well over 500 to 1,000 articles and columns.
It's amazing.
I've got, almost 300 podcasts. And I don't say this to brag. I'm not a bragging person and a very humble person, and often we'll pray that, that humble circumstances keep coming at me, because I like being humble, and humble keeps you hungry. Mm-hmm. So it's a good thing. And that's what I love about entrepreneurship is it keeps you humble, it keeps you hungry. And that's a good thing. So anyways, I just hope people would take it more seriously and protect their rights and use it as an asset. I was reading an article this morning about James Bond and the IP franchise that they have being MGM was already purchased by Amazon, but now it's being controlled by Amazon in terms of the creative side. And what that says to me is that IP is so important in the sense that it's a tradable asset. Mm-hmm. It's something that you can, turn over and sell to somebody. Or utilize to create more business. So just very, very important and great question.
And I know that you've also been deeply involved in leadership, serving as the president of the California Lawyers Association. That's a big deal, but also advising entrepreneurs through the U.S. Small Business Administration. What has that experience taught you about leadership and the role of legal strategy and business success?
What I'll say is that I've been a big believer in sort of a 3-pronged approach to life and success, and maybe even more focused on business, but the idea that you need to have geography, branding, and community. The 3 prongs. And geography is you need to be where the action is at, both digitally and physically. So attending conferences, being present on social media, all that stuff. Showing up, is 90%, right? Maybe even 99%. And then I think with branding, you got to create a brand and you got to establish it. You got to maintain it and keep it going. Jeff Bezos would say that your brand is often what people would say after you leave the room, right? And so a brand is so important. There's a great quote by Jonathan Perelman, who used to be an executive at one of the big town agencies that was sold. Now he's at CAA. And he would say, content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the pants.
I love it.
And it's this great quote. Actually, I learned in business school from another presentation. And I was just like, I love that quote. And it's so true. But I say this because you need to create content, much like what you're doing, putting a podcast out, being instrument for information and sharing information and doing it in a good, valuable, genuine way, like you're doing. It's so important. And community, to your point, community is all about being a part of organizations that will have a direct impact on your career. And vice versa, you having a direct impact on your profession. I care deeply about the legal profession. To me, it's something that's a part of me. I love it, and for the most part, you hear most lawyers, they wouldn't say that. Practice of law is very difficult. They love it, but maybe it's like a love-hate relationship. But I love it, and I love doing it, and I think leadership is just a part of. It's a part of me. Something I've always wanted to do and continue to strive to do. And so it may be easier for me in that sense, but I just encourage people to join organizations and to take on leadership opportunity. It's so important to your development. It's so important for relationships. It's fantastic. I will share this little antidote. This morning I was talking with my dad, and I talk to my parents all the time, once a day at least. And I love talking to them. I love their advice and just love hearing from them. And you got to take, those precious moments as your parents are still around and your friends and family are still around as we get older. And my dad was telling me that one of the guys that he used to work with called him today to catch up. And I remember years ago, this gentleman had asked me, and I feel like one day I'm going to write a sitcom about my dad and the workers that he used to work with in the industry that he worked with, because it's just a bunch of characters that I got to meet as a kid.
Right.
And the story is that when I was younger, I was trying to, figure out how to get to law school, what I wanted to do and all this stuff. And you're doing like teenager things and, you're confused and you're like, well, what career do I want? Where do I want to go? But you're also worried about what are you going to do on the weekend, with your girlfriend or whatever it is, right? It's like trying to figure all those things out.
Right.
So he's like, well, Jeremy, what do you want to be? And I told him, I was like, I think I want to be like an FBI agent or a lawyer, right? And he goes,
those are two so like top of line professions. I love your mentality. Sorry, keep going with the story here. Just love that.
No, totally, and it's true, right? And I was like, and then I want to be in politics, right? Awesome. And he goes,
I'm not surprised.
What? He goes, if I don't see that in the next 10 years, you're going to see this size 12 foot, up your butt. And I was just like,
he's ready for
I started laughing, and I said, man, that's some tough talk, And we were joking around about it. So my dad calls me today. This is like 30 years later, right? And he calls me today, maybe not that long, 25 years later. And he goes, I talked to, our friend, today. And I was like, oh, great. And he goes, man, you know what he told me? I was like, what? And he goes, looking at Jeremy's life, I feel like I've missed out. He's like, man, this guy travels. He knows people, like shaking hands. And again, I say this as a point of like having ambition and having discipline, treating people well, being genuine. These are all things that, being humble, these are all things that I really truly enjoy. And I just mention it as a point that like anybody can do this. I came from very humble beginnings, grew up in a youngest of 9 kids in my family. None of my brothers and sisters went to school. Now some of them have gone back. One of my oldest sister just graduated with her bachelor's degree.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah. That's amazing.
But I have, 52 nephews and nieces. I mean, I love my family, but I just share that story as to, anybody can do this. Just put your mind to it, be disciplined about it, and just push forward.
Speaking of education, Jeremy, you have your BA from UCLA, you have your degrees in law, business, entertainment, media, sports management, Pepperdine University, on top of your JD from Thomas Jefferson School of Law. I'd like to know how education has shaped both the legal and business expertise to your approach to client representation and to who you are today.
No, thanks for asking. And, when I was growing up, I had no idea how to get to law school. I had no idea the time or energy that would go into it. Again, I think that being naive is a very powerful and good tool. Mm-hmm. But I got, some mentors along the way and read a lot of books and just, as I do a lot in life, is you take a risk. You jump off the diving board and you see what happens. Obviously, you want to kind of know what you're jumping into and you do as much homework as you can, but oftentimes you don't know. And you just have to take the jump and realize, what's going to happen, right? And so I think for me, education was very important. I realized that it was a tool to gather knowledge that could be useful in application. Information is power, but it's only powerful in the sense that it can be used in an applied sense, right?
Yeah.
Gather all the information you want, but unless you can actually use it and analyze it. And so to me, it was like, all right, I want to meet people. I want to network. I want to have the at least the degree to get me the interview or get me into the door or get me into the practice, right? Mm-hmm. And as a lawyer, I needed to have the education and the license to practice law. So all those things kind of came together and I said, okay, I love education, really enjoy this. And I sort of had one of these moments where, in high school, I took some AP classes towards the end of my high school experience. And it was not something that in the beginning that I thought that I would be involved in, right? I was much more interested in social and hanging out with friends and putting on parties, stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. But then I got to a point where I said, all right, that's all fun. And I love parties. I love hanging out with people, but also like I need to be serious about my education.
Right.
And so I started to do some civics economics classes and political science, loved it. And then I didn't know where to go. I didn't have any advice as to where to apply to college or what that looked like or how that would go. So I applied to some schools. And actually before I applied, I had a great conversation with a friend of mine who had suggested that I go to junior college. At that time I was like, what's junior college, right? And so I did it and I fell in love with the education. I said, man, this is fantastic. I'm not being forced to go, but I get to do it. Like, that's amazing. Like, I took that approach as opposed to like, oh, I have to go to school to get a degree. I was more like, I'm doing this on my own volition and I get a degree at the end of it. This is fantastic. And Absolutely. I get to learn and meet people. And then I transferred to UCLA, I think kind of as a joke. I was like, I'll apply and see if I get in. And I got in.
Of course you did.
I had good grades and I worked hard and all that. But I just didn't know. I didn't have, again, very humble background. I didn't know. I was just like, I'm going to try this. And then law school was similar experience. I said, hey, I'll try it and see if I can get in and apply. Again, no confidence in that regard, had no background in it, And then as far as Pepperdine went, I sort of applied that geography, branding, community approach. I was like, well, I want to be back in Los Angeles where I grew up. That's where the entertainment industry is, and the entertainment sports capital of the world.
Right.
I want to put another great brand on the resume with regard to Pepperdine. It's a great opportunity to get specific education towards entertainment, media, and sports. And I was like, it's a year program to get the LLM. Why not? Let's do it. And and they offered some scholarships, and I said, fantastic, let's do it. And I could work full time and work my schedule around it. It was great, wonderful experience that I had. And then as I was in that LLM program, I took an MBA class in digital media and entertainment. And it was so interesting because in digital media and entertainment, I'm with business students. And I was like, man, I really like this. And I thought, man, if I ever got an opportunity to go to business school, as crazy as it sounds, I would do it because I'd love to have the JD MBA combo. But I was never like a great math person. So I was like, taking the GMAT, no thanks.
Right.
And so because I was a lawyer, I got the GMAT waived.
I was going to say there's probably some type of way because you already have all of this other education that it really does apply and it really does match. So I love to hear that. At least I'm glad you didn't have to take it. That is good.
No, God forbid. It wouldn't have looked good. So, you want me to write about a math problem? No problem. I'll tell you all about it. But so anyways, it worked out great and had some great, wonderful professors and obviously meeting you and other wonderful students, the faith-based, education. I'd say the faith-based environment was great. I thought the education was very fair and balanced and it was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. And it's opened up so many opportunities for my clients and for me to think differently about my business, about me as a person, meeting new people, challenging myself, all those different things. And, just thank God. It's been a great, wonderful experience.
Truly has. And Jeremy, we're coming up on time. So I just want to, before we wrap up, do you have any final advice or key takeaways for our listeners, whether they're business leaders, entrepreneurs, or creatives that are looking at you for really anything that you want to leave us with?
No, well, thank you, Jessica. And I appreciate you having me on and you and the staff that you've got putting this stuff together. It's just been fantastic and wish you all the best. I guess what I would say is don't quit. I think oftentimes people, they get to a point and they get fed up and they quit. One of the things that I often hear in entertainment and sports, and I hear this more often because these areas are more sexy. I think sometimes they're more sexy. They're more sexy in appearance than they are in reality. But don't quit, because I think that people will get to a point and they get frustrated and they want to leave. And often people will tell me, oh, Jeremy, you're doing what I wanted to do, and I'm like, well, thinking to myself, circumstances change, people get married, they have kids, they have different responsibilities. So I think, again, you need to be the last person standing because, and I always tell this story. When I was in law school, I showed up to a sports law society event and sports entertainment law society event. We had like 400 people that were there. And everybody, when asked the question, who wants to be the next Jerry Maguire? Everybody in the class raised their hand. Maybe a couple people didn't. And by the time I graduated, I was the only person in my class pursuing a career in sports and entertainment. Now, there was people who went off to work for studios or what have you, but in my particular class, I was the only one to start my own practice or even go to a law firm or whatever in any category in that way to do a sports entertainment. So either I was really crazy or I just didn't quit.
You didn't quit.
So I just encourage people. Now, look, there's going to come time in life where, the old sort of St. Peter example where it's like when the flood comes or the disaster comes and you're like, I'm just waiting on God. It's like, well, okay, but if the ladder comes down from the helicopter, you probably want to jump on it.
Absolutely.
So I'm also a big believer in the sense of you need to go where the doors are opening as well.
Yep.
And if doors are closing, I often find that in life, most stress and heartache and headache comes from holding on to relationships for too long in both business and in life. And if relationships are not good for you, obviously the marriage excluded, marriage is a lifetime, obviously commitment. People need to be more serious about marriage. But anyway, that's my 2 cents from Dr. Phil today. So
I love it. That was actually so incredible. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. I loved it. I loved everything you said.
Thank you. A true pleasure. And I hope we get to see each other soon.
Absolutely. We're going to have to do a part 2 because there's more questions I want to ask now that we kind of connected a little bit more there. But for everybody else that's listening in that wants to connect with Jeremy or learn more about California Sports Lawyer, be sure to check out the links in our show notes. As always, thank you for joining us on Communicating Capital.